Travis Meredith, the Director of Veterinary Channel Intelligence for Animalytix, is our host tonight. We are going to talk about some of the key points of data that point to opportunity in feline health. And then we're going to do a quick reveal of the top 10 most feline-friendly cities according to a study done by Trupanion and Redfin. So we'll save that little tidbit till the end, and then we'll launch into some questions. So Travis, would love to have you start us off with our traditional Bridge Club toast.
To toast.
Yeah.
Let's see, two long evenings and short hangovers.
Ooh. Cheers on that.
Cheers to that one. All right, so Travis, what is top of mind in all the data that you see, with regard to the greatest or most confounding situation around feline health?
So just a little bit of a kind of a warm up of a disclaimer. I got to say, for those of you who don't know me, for those of you who know me, they know I'm a data nerd, and I do this for a living now. Trained as a veterinarian, did a residency in reproduction, still own practice, still exposed to practice on a day-to-day level, but I do nothing but look at numbers on a day-to-day level, and that's kind of my new obsession in life. So living as a data nerd, and so as a data nerd, you're used to visuals and pictures and graphics and colors, and so this format here is a complete step out of my comfort zone, like there is none before. Because I'm used to being able to go, just if you look here, you see the line going up or down. We got, I may actually end up getting up and start pointing at stuff just out of habit. That's a disclaimer. But so I think there's, what I did for tonight was really go back in and pull some of our data that we presented over the past couple months. And just for this format to kind of just pull out some themes, if you will, and throw them out there. Not necessarily as good, bad, or indifferent, but things that we've seen and things that we've reported on, and then really kind of leave them open for discussion. I think one of the first things that I'd comment is that there's a lot of data that's out there, but there's not always a lot of data that's pointing in the same direction. And so one of the things we actually pulled together, Karen Felstead and I did a lecture earlier in the year and pulled some data on just pet ownership in general. And the question about, is pet ownership going up or going down? And, there's data that comes out of the AVMA that looks at a study from 2001 all the way up until about 2016. And they show this nice, bright and shiny line going up and up and up, just like the roller coaster, if you will, showing that pet ownership is going up. And that's a good thing. And then if you see me kind of looking out the corner of my eye, I have my visuals. I got to see, I got to live by the pictures. But we work with several other groups, one called Packaged Facts, they are a consumer research group only. So all they do is they work with consumers. And so they might work with grocery consumers or people who shop for hardware or clothing or retail or whatever. But for studies like this, they do a tremendous amount of actual pet owner research. And one of the things they've found is about over the past 10 years, according to their data, and they've got a very significant sample size, pet ownership in general has been pretty stagnant. They've seen across the board, they talk about pet ownership being about 50%, so about 1 out of every 2 households in the US having a pet. But since 2008, while they've seen dog ownership tick up from about 35 to 38%, so kind of coming up to 4 in 10 households. One of the things they've seen is actually a little bit of a downward trend in households that actually own cats. So I think one of the first things that I would think about is that we don't know. I think it's a little skeptical on the data that's out there. Is ownership in general going up or going down? We saw, I can speak really personally here on the East Coast, we saw a lot of ownership and surrenders from about 2008 through about 2012, when you saw a lot of recessions and people's lifestyles changing, being turned upside down. You saw a lot, and that seems to really kind of gone down in general. But one of the things I would say personally, one of my personal observations is if you look at a lot of the shelter situations, while many shelters are actually in the process of importing dogs, bringing in dogs from other locations, from other parts of the countries, from other countries in some cases, a lot of shelters still have a surplus of cats. And so that represents a big challenge, I think, to pushing ownership in general. How's that for a first spin?
That's a good one. That's a great one. I was just thinking as you were talking, Travis, that you make a really good point that there's so much data that some of it is contrary with each other. And I also think the point about the dogs up and the dog shortage are consistent with some of the things we've been reporting on, Catherine, in a couple of our sessions. And again, it just ties into conversations I've had the past couple of weeks because Jane, we've talked about too, the prevalence of cats in shelters and how do we help to clear the shelters of the cats and have them be presented as an option for those people who come in wanting dogs and there aren't great dogs available. So, hey, take a kitty home with you. So it's kind of a real circle of life kind of story here. Questions from Penny, Denise, Julie, Megan, anybody before we kind of carry on? Or comments, things you've seen in your data?
Are these statistics specifically for the United States? I'm sorry if I missed that.
Yes, for these, anything that I talk about, while Animalytix does work in the US and Canada, tonight is just about the US right now.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
And the packaged facts stuff too is always US based, I believe.
Yep.
Or at least what I've seen. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's interesting stuff. So what else are you seeing, Travis? I mean, you guys do an awful lot of reporting on medicines sold for both dogs and cats. And is there anything else there you're seeing that's kind of curious or really you found interesting?
Yeah, and you know what, I'm going to take a little thought there and push that to the end. Got my notes here. We track, so I'll give you guys the 30-second overview of what Animalytix does. As veterinarians, I always tell people, in order to provide services to our clients, we use stuff. We use stuff to provide specific things for our clients, meaning that to complete wellness exams, we use vaccines. When we're in the surgical suite, there's a whole basket of products that we use. When it's related to flea and tick, heartworm, different elements of wellness. And what we do at Animalytix is we track the utilization of, and actually what I specifically do at Animalytix is we use specific baskets of products, what we call marker products, to track and report large trends of what's going on in clinical practice. And so we use things like the use of inhalant anesthesias to track the surgical suite. We use, in Canada, we have a very big initiative for actually using all of the therapeutic diets to monitor pet nutrition and how that's going on. We use wellness vaccines, the use of core vaccines in practice to what's going on in terms of wellness medicine. And so that always it doesn't behoove itself to the best environment for this to kind of explain. It's a little bit more complex than that. But at the end of the day, what we do is we track the utilization of all of those products across our entire industry. So all 50 states, all 30,000 veterinary hospitals, and we're actually tracking and seeing what's going up and down. And I think a few kind of facts that I will throw out there in general, and I'll just throw them out in no particular order, but I think we could kind of open up for discussion. And some of you guys have probably heard of these and maybe some of you haven't, is if you look at veterinary medicine on the whole over about the past 18 months, we've been on a pretty good ride. Not a great ride that we were seeing through 2015 and 2016, where we were seeing a lot of double-digit growth, but a good ride. And where what we're seeing is about 5% growth on an annualized basis every year. And so it's been nice, it's been comfortable, it's been steady. That's an across the board number. When you start to cut that down into specific areas of practice, we start to look at things like canine core vaccines, to give you a point of reference. So we track almost 40 million canine core vaccines that are utilized all over the country. And what we've seen is that, for about the past 15 months, canine core vaccines have been following that same level of healthy growth. And only within the past 12 months, we've started to see actually a slowdown in that time frame. And so we're about over the past 12 months, when you look at canine core doses, there's only about a 1% growth rate. So you almost see that slowing a little bit. So that gives you a point of reference. On the flip side of that, when you look at cats, for about 18 months, we were actually seeing a decline in feline core vaccine utilization. And so we were seeing the use of core vaccines in practice actually going down. And it's not the same in every part of the United States. Some areas of the country are more significantly affected than others. Areas like the mid-central states, areas like Colorado, we were seeing areas of actually good growth. And then areas like where I live here on the East Coast, the mid-Atlantic, up into the New England states, we're actually seeing a more significant decline. And so that was really sort of a really kind of concerning fact for about the past year and a half. The good news to that spin is that actually for within the past most recent 12 months, we've actually seen a growth for the first positive number where we've seen a growth in the utilization of HCP doses within the past 12 months. So I'm a little cautiously optimistic. I always like to see numbers going up versus numbers going down. That's always something to see and something that we'll watch. The other two kind of data points that I'll throw out there, and I think, would then sort of open up for discussion, is we also look at where care is provided and what those elements look like. And what we've seen is, if you look at dogs, what you see is the growth in dog vaccines is occurring in the greatest amount at the biggest practices. So the bigger the practice, the higher the growth in canine core vaccines. Makes sense, right? Bigger practices, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 doctor practices, they're busy, they're higher volume. They can just generate that level of care. And we've seen a very tight correlation between the growth of canine core and canine wellness with the growth of practice size. The bigger the practice, the higher the growth, the smaller the practice, lower growth. Interestingly enough, we've seen the flip side of that with cats. And where we see growth occurring in feline vaccines is actually at the smaller practices. So the smaller entities are the ones where we're seeing growth in feline vaccine utilization, and the big practices, the big large practices, we're actually seeing a little bit of a decline. So I think that's a really interesting point. And then the last thing I'll kind of throw out there, I think, and where we can kind of just open up discussion, is also where the foundation of that wellness experience begins. And I think Jane has heard me talk about this before. When you look at the low-cost providers, the shelters and the shelter roles, and what they play in starting off feline care, 1 out of every 10 dog vaccines, or 1 out of every 10 canine core doses is given by a low-cost provider. So roughly 10%. It's a relatively small percentage. In the case of cats, it's actually 1 out of every 5. So 20% of all the feline core vaccines are being administered in those shelter situations. And I think that's really important as you think about cats being adopted, moving into the family, and how to move that spectrum of care from the original holding facility over to establishing a relationship with a veterinarian. So I just threw a bunch of numbers out there, and I think it's a good time to pause for a second and rather than keep hearing me talk, maybe actually see what everybody else thinks of that information.
Appreciate that.
Yes.
I was wondering how you feel titers might play into those vaccine numbers. I know our clinic, because we have 2 holistic doctors, we do an awful lot of titers on the core vaccines.
That's a great question, and super question. And I think it will become, I think it's a trend that will become more meaningful, but as an overall representation of the population, titers are still a very small percentage. And so while they're being done on an individual hospital, like if you were to look at an individual hospital basis, they would probably, obviously they would be more meaningful, but across the larger population, the aggregate population of all of the hospitals, it's still a really, really small population who's adopted titers quite yet.
Okay, and then I had another question that's kind of fear-free related,
Mhm.
because it's always been my feeling that a lot of cats don't go in for their annuals and their vaccines because of their reaction to the car ride and all that. I'm suspecting that if the fear-free really starts to take off and people start really pushing, clinics start really pushing that this is what we provide for your cat that's above and beyond maybe other clinics, I'm hoping to see a rise in that because even in our clinic, we see a lot of sick cats, but we don't see a lot of wellness like we do with dogs.
We do the same thing. Our practice, for anybody who's been to it, actually a couple of people on the call have been, we've got more of a boutique type practice. It's very quiet. It's very sort of small, but we see the same phenomenon. And I would actually say that your point is dead on to the point of, if I can rewind back to that one point I mentioned, just looking at the disparity where growth is occurring. So without putting any other sort of cause and effect on it, but just looking at the types of entities where growth is occurring, growth in dogs is occurring at large, at higher volume, more doctors, more full service, right? It's not an encumbrance to bring, my lab into a big, busy practice. In fact, he's probably going to look forward to that because it's a chance to interact with 1 million people and 1 million other animals. But if you look at the growth that's occurring in our data, when we look at cats and we're seeing it's in those smaller entities, what's typical of just think about a typical smaller entity without even putting all of those other details to it. They're usually smaller. There's less doctors. There's not as much of a churn. It's quieter. They just don't have those same other distractions and barriers that you would have for regular cat owners. So I would say the data just by itself is supporting exactly what you're saying, which is cat owners in general are being drawn to areas which are going to be more friendly to them, for lack of a better word.
Do you know, Travis, in you guys' data, do you look at, or do you know which practices are feline only versus companion animal? I didn't mean to wing that at you, out of the blue. I'm just really curious to know if there would be a difference between the growth in a cat only practice versus a mixed companion practice. Just curiosity.
No, we do. And I'm guilty for not having the information right in front of me. Again, that population is still a very, very small population of the universe.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing that I've learned over time, just being in veterinary medicine, is that trends are very, very slow to take. I was, not to get too far off topic, but I was on one of the development teams that brought the first 3-year officially labeled vaccines to market. So back in the days of Intervet, we brought what is now the Novivac line of vaccines. And we were so gung-ho about bringing these vaccines that had actually been through the trials that were labeled for extended duration utilization, and then moved on. And then with Animalytix a couple of years ago, we actually did a pretty developed study through a partner through the PIM systems. And what we found was after 10 years of extended duration of immunity data, almost 3/4 of practices were still vaccinating on an annual basis. And so one of the things I've noticed is, so whether it's titers or whether it's feline only or whether it's extended duration protocols, we as a profession are really, really slow to move. The good news to that is when you do, you usually stick there, right? We tend to be kind of sticky in what we do. So if you can move that way, you can be sticky about it. And that's the positive way of looking at it. It's just sort of moving the herd, if you will, along the path.
So we are at the 5:25. What am I talking about? I wish it was 5:25, 7:25 mark. And I know we always promise that anybody who has to leave after 25 minutes is invited to do so, but I think there are probably a lot more questions to answer, and I haven't gotten to that top 10 list yet. So you better all hang around just a little bit longer. to talk further. So question that all right, so guys, feel free to ask your questions, but I'm going to pop up with one that I have right here, because as you were talking about the feline health and the fact that 1 in 5 cats get a vaccine at like a low cost type of thing. Penny just mentioned that most of the cats that come in are for, I think you said that, Penny, the illness for sick cat care, right? So if we're talking about, again, opportunity, and this is kind of sad to like tie opportunity and sick cats together, but if we as a profession are trying to promote more cats into the practice, this is just your opinion I'm asking. Are we better to talk about illnesses in cats as opposed to preventive care? I mean, just from the data you see, is there any correlation there?
That's a great question.
That is a good question.
Oh,
Because we're really good at, we're really good at taking care of sick cats.
So I actually got to participate in a project a couple months ago, and so I'm gonna share anecdotal data where I got to tour around the country and go to a couple different cities and actually sit in what were essentially focus groups. And the first hour was about 25 dog owners, and then the second hour was actually the first hour was 20 to 25 cat owners, and the second hour was 25 dog owners. And the only rule is that I couldn't let anybody know that I was a veterinarian. I was shocked by what I heard. And the disparity between the perception of dog owners and their relationship with veterinarians and the perception of cat owners and their relationship with veterinarians. It was very telling for me. And I think a lot of it, again, we have dog and cat owners coming into our practice every day. So it's not like all of a sudden these are people I'd never met before. But to being able to see controlled groups going through the same exercise and their perceptions of need and where there were shortcomings, and the only difference between them was whether they were primary cat owners or primary dog owners. It was amazing to me, the things that I took away. Dog owners, high level of loyalty to the veterinarian. Veterinarian is the first choice that they go to. High level of trust. They feel like they're getting value of what they're being provided. The cat owner group was extremely different. Higher instance of distrust. I've gone and I didn't get questions answered. I felt like I overpaid. It was too much. I'll never forget the young guy in his 20s who told me that he YouTubed everything that he needed to take care of his cat, and that he didn't have any need to go back to his veterinarian. It was, some people say, oh, well, dog owners, they're part of the family. Cats are pets. For me, it was actually beyond that. I think there was a true difference in perception between how dog owners, we've done a really great job of talking to dog owners and sort of getting and engaging in that element. We haven't quite hit the nail on the head when it comes to cat owners. That's
really great insight. That's worth every dime we paid you to be here, Travis, right there.
Exactly.
Wow.
I'll owe you 2 drinks now instead of 1.
Now he's like empty on his drink and he still has to end with a toast.
Yeah.
So I have to go in a minute.
That was really, really good. So any other quick questions like right here that you guys have top of mind right now, or should I dive into the top 10 and then we can circle back to more questions?
Go ahead and dive into the top 10, then I'll come back to mine.
Okay. All right. So I thought this was kind of interesting. When Travis and I were talking about this, I'm like, I looked at a variety of resources and there was some crossover, one resource to the next, but the one that I felt was probably the most valid, most like true research recently, and the newest, actually, this is from June of this was from this summer, this June. Trupanion and Redfin combined to come up with a list, and they based this on cat-friendly features such as housing with high ceilings and multiple bathrooms, so you can have extra spaces for litter boxes, right? Knowing that cats don't want just one litter box, they want multiple litter boxes. It talked about the number of cat-only clinics, the number of cat-friendly shelters. What else was in there? The number of feline-specific services for grooming, for example. I mean, they really looked at a lot of data that was was really, indicative of the fact that there would be good places for cats and cat owners to hang out. Cat cafes were one of the things they kind of looked at, and just some of the other cat related services, hotels in the area that allowed cats. We know there are a lot of hotels and restaurants that will allow dogs to come in, but what about the ones that allow cats? So anyway, all that preview, it's interesting that only one was in the Northeast of the top 10. 3 were in the Northwest, 2 were in the Southeast, 2 in the Southwest, and 2 in the Midwest. So those darn Northeasterners, I guess, just aren't very cat friendly, but here are the top 10 cities. Number 10 is San Antonio, Texas. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think of that as a cat city.
I don't either.
Feels outdoorsy and Texan. I don't know what I
I
mean.
don't feel that. Yeah, that's kind of sticky and hot. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Like some cats just wouldn't like. So San Antonio, Texas. Number 9 was Clarksville, Tennessee. Again,
Anything in Tennessee, I just feel like that's cat friendly. I mean, just cat friendly in general.
see, I feel like Tennessee again is like hunting dog territory. I don't know, for whatever. And my son goes to school there. You think I would know better, but it feels. Number 8 was Dayton, Ohio, which kind of made sense to me because it's a college town. A little more educated, maybe a little more sophisticated. Number 7 is New York, New York. So the good old Big Apple. Number 6 is Raleigh, North Carolina. Didn't surprise me as much because I think it's a growing population among especially millennials and Gen Zers. It's really a popular place that younger people are going. Number 5 is Tulsa, Oklahoma. I mean, right smack in the middle of the Midwest.
Brief media, you're in the right place.
Exactly. Right. Maybe that's where all the cats are in their offices.
Exactly.
Number 4 is Bellingham, Washington. So obviously another suburb area. Number 3, Orlando, Florida. No,
Kind of weird.
go to Disney and bring their cats. I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting population of people. Again, kind of a cosmopolitan population. It's become over the years. Number 2 is Spokane, Washington. And number 1 is Corvallis, Oregon. So I think in the top 4, 3 of the top 4 are actually one of those northwestern parts of the world.
So do you want to know where the cats actually are right now?
Yeah.
So I actually went and pulled all of our HCP core doses and looked at total volume of doses as to where they are over the past year. So interestingly, you said, I'll give you the top 10.
Yep.
And this is where they are today and where they're moving. Number 1 is New York. Number 2 is Los Angeles. 3, surprisingly, is the Philadelphia Metro.
Yeah.
4, Chicago. Then we go south. 5 is Dallas. 6 is Houston. 7 would be Washington, D.C. 8 is Atlanta. 9 is Boston. And 10 would be Seattle.
Well, they're population dense areas.
Right.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
So if you look at where they are, so you see a high level of correlation to those.
And out of those, only 1 really corresponds with one of the best cities for cats, according to this Trupanion Redfin.
So what you have is a lot of angry cats because they're living in places that are not very conducive to their needs.
Yeah.
It's interesting if some of these bigger cities could learn from because if you look at it, with the exception really of New York City, they're all cities, but they're smallish cities. They're not massive cities like New York, LA, Philly, Chicago. Kind of interesting, the correlations there. Huh.
We'll have to ask Travis to slice his data on per capita.
Yeah, I like that. I like the per capita.
No, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, that would be a good one. We could have a follow-up where we really kind of talk about that. I like that headline a lot. Interesting stuff. So
Interesting.
yeah. So questions from the crowd, comments on the cities where the cats are or where the cats should be? Anything in there?
Travis, this is Jane, and I want to circle back to your core vaccines from low-cost providers. And does that bundle up the mobile shop clinics and those
It
kinds
does.
of
For that figure it does. So typically when we present, we look a lot at common framework, meaning, what is the common framework between what they're doing? And so we, a lot of times when present, so we don't present 100 different classifications of practice. We try to bring it in. And so we call them, for a lot of this presentation, this value, we call them value providers. And that includes shelters. And it's gotten hard. You can't even look anymore. The days of sort of the self-sustaining internal shelter only is really gone, right? A lot of the shelters now are both taking care of internal animal populations and then interacting with the outside public to some level. So shelters, humane societies, rescues, and then sort of primary vaccine clinics, low-cost providers. So they all fall into that value provider. And what they're doing is they're speaking to a customer that's looking for something that's more succinct, right? Sort of they're trying to be pragmatic and looking for an immediate need as opposed to a broader experience.
Interesting.
I have a follow-up question to that then. Is there a way to think about package facts and their trend analyses with millennial owners and the desire to be cause connected and following that trend? Well, I'll go to the SPCA shot clinic, vaccine clinic, because I'm supporting the SPCA.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a brilliant question, and I don't think I don't think anybody's looked at that in a really intelligent way, right? I think there's probably some anecdotal experience, and there's probably examples where that's worked for someone before. But I don't know of anybody who's looked at that study. But I think that's a great question as to not just where are they going, but why are they going there?
Yeah, I like that.
I would be interested in that data point just across the board to understand what is the key driver for the why.
Yeah.
That's the internal like research. So you may be the total research nerd here, but I do like data. But someone else getting it and me hearing it.
No problem there. We'll welcome anybody on the boat. It's not exclusive.
Well,
I'm writing that down.
Yeah.
I love it.
Maybe they'll get engaged in that.
And Penny, thank you for bringing your cat. You seem to be the only one tonight. We had 2 last night. We need more cats.
Oh, Denise's cat must be hidden somewhere. So I'm really curious now. So hearing all of this, and hearing the shelter questions and the low cost from Jane, and kind of the explanation and the comments that Travis has shared with us from the perspective of you, Penny, and you, Denise, in practice, how does that make you guys feel in terms of the efforts you're putting forth within your practice to serve cat owners? And how does it make you feel about what you think you're doing really well and what you think you could be doing better?
For me, I think anytime I hear somebody say that there's a financial issue, I will still encourage them to go to those low-cost clinics for vaccines and know that we are here for you when something comes up that's a medical need. I think it's important to respect that people have financial boundaries. And I also feel that it's important for us to really, moving forward, be educating people about cats, their behavior, their medical needs, how they hide their symptoms. I think people need to know these things, whether we're putting it on our Facebook pages or we're sending out emails. If somebody's missed their senior exam, that's a really good time to send out an email talking about how cats hide their symptoms. Mm-hmm. So I really, really think it has to do with educating clients. Because I just think for so long, for so many people, cats are just cats. And if they're indoor only, they don't need this, they don't need that, they don't, you know, you don't have to do fecals because they could never get an intestinal parasite. So I just think really driving home preventative care, the importance of lab work, behavior, all of that needs to be addressed. And I think you really need in every clinic, I think there need to be several people who are highly educated and comfortable in talking to people, you know, when somebody has especially a behavioral problem, so that we're here to help no matter what.
That's a nice sentiment. Yeah, I love that too. Very, very nicely stated too. Thank you, Penny.
Thank you.
Yeah. Denise, comments? Denise, do you have any, you want to weigh in from your practice's perspective, from your perspective, your personal perspective?
Yeah, I'm not actually in a practice right now. But personal perspective, I was thinking about this, especially from last night, and let me know if my Wi-Fi goes out because it's been kind of iffy.
You're good.
Julie has the tornado and I just have bad Wi-Fi. Is, you know, cats are in a way easier to take care of. Their restroom is indoor plumbing, where dogs is the outhouse. You know, you can pretty much leave their food out all the time. And so this thought process of not really having to bond with your cat because the cat is a little more independent. Maybe, I don't know, it's trying to hook in with Travis's feelings that he discovered with that two population, which is kind of sad, but you know, I'm just trying to reach for why this is, and how do we as veterinary professionals encourage that bond a little bit stronger. And that's it's very interesting. I have to figure that, you think on it a little bit more, you know.
It's a lot to think about, that's for sure. That's for sure.
I can tell you that one of the things I do when somebody gets a new cat or a new kitten is I want to help them celebrate not just getting a new cat or kitten, but celebrate the discovery of what that cat's personality is going to be like, and how important it is to nurture who they are. And the more you do that with a cat, the more you get out of them. Because the people that know that about cats, that's why they're the clients who say, I didn't trust the doctor. I didn't feel like the doctor connected with me. We are a whole different type of person, cat owners versus dog owners. And I just think that we have to nurture that. I understand, and your cat is going to be unique to every other cat in the world, and celebrate that.
So you bring up something really important. I just had a eureka moment, and the notion that when people talk about their dogs, they talk about what the breed is of the dog, they talk about the name of the dog, and then it's always about the looks of the dog, right? It's, oh, your dog's so cute. Oh yeah, he's really snuggly or whatever. When you talk to a cat owner, they do go to personality. They talk about the personality. If that person is a diva or whatever, I never hear a dog owner describe their dog as a diva, but I will actually hear people describe their cats and they go straight to the personality versus, sure, they'll go, I have a Persian or I have a calico, but then they go straight in to personality. So you gave me a eureka moment that's kind of the entry point for veterinarians, right? To make that connection.
That's a really good point. That was an excellent point. Excellent, excellent. So we are getting up on 45 minutes in to our conversation here, folks, and we always try to be as considerate as possible of your time. So I think I'll ask if there are any last questions for Travis this evening.
Well,
I know we'll do a toast.
I know, but I'm like, oh, we can start that.
Catherine, you talked. This is
last one. I know, I'm sorry.
I will never forget the toast. Absolutely never. But I just want to give people a moment to think, because sometimes it comes up at the very end. So great conversation. Travis, this was great insight. I really appreciate. Number one, I knew you'd be phenomenal on this because you are just so dang knowledgeable. You know, it's in your head and in your heart, it's not just on a piece of paper. So I don't care how many monitors you have in front of you. It definitely comes across just as very sincere and authentic. So thank you for bringing that to the Bridge Club. I know we've been after you for a little while now to come do something with us. So I'm glad this worked out.
As a quick side story, I will tell you though, Travis, we did have one person break all the rules, right? So they came in, and no names will be mentioned, Mark Cushing. And, and so what he did was, we said no slides. So he took sheets of paper and he put it in front of his face that had charts on it that nobody could see because he couldn't. He was much like you. He could not live without it. But it was actually, it's a big challenge to actually have a conversation instead of going, if you see here,
Yep.
And you did it phenomenally well. So thank you for taking the leap of faith and trusting us that this was actually a really good way to have this kind of discussion. So really do.
Anytime.
Yeah. Definitely thanks to all of you for being present too. And you know, we have 3 more feline health sessions coming up.
Really good ones. They're all building off of each other. So that's really cool. Friday's going to be like a wham bam. Everyone's going to feel so educated.
We kind of had a plan here. This just didn't happen by accident. We actually had a plan for this week. So thanks everyone for participating. Travis, please, would you like to send us off with a final toast for the evening? All the work for you, my friend.
Thank you all for coming, and to free refills.
Oh, I love it. Cheers.
Thank you, guys.
Julie, you watched your glass, so now you've got, so all 3 of us have our little glass tonight. So that's awesome.
Exactly, yeah. So cheers, folks. Thanks a bunch. Have a really great evening.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.